Hello everyone, Eugenie here. Today we are talking babies, birth and breastfeeding with Brisbane Homeopath Patricia Hatherly. She started out her working life as a teacher and then she went on to study homeopathy and practice and teach it worldwide. She's also worked as a childbirth educator and lactation consultant, and she's written 2 books. The first is The Lax, a Materia Medica and Repertory, and the second is The Homeopathic Physician's Guide to Lactation. So I have her Lax book, which is integrated into my homeopathic computer software, and I use it in the clinic literally every single day. It is so helpful. So the Lax are a group of homeopathic remedies that are made from the milk of various animals. So we have remedies made from the milk of a dog, a cat, a dolphin, a lion, a donkey, and yes, even humans. And there's many more. That's just to name a few. It's a very fascinating group of remedies, and I have a little confession to make. I love using them in my clinic. So part of getting Patricia on today was me being a little bit selfish. I really wanted to pick her brains about how she uses these remedies in her clinic and what got her interested in them. In this podcast, she speaks of how the remedy made from the milk of a kangaroo is helpful for people who have trouble settling into Australia. And of course, as synchronicity would have it, I had a case in my clinic just a day or so after recording this podcast, and I ended up prescribing this remedy made from the milk of a kangaroo to this client of mine. And I can't wait to hear how she responds. So if birth, babies, and breastfeeding interests you, you're going to love this podcast almost as much as I loved putting it together. Patricia is really a wealth of knowledge, and I urge you to check out her website, patriciahatherly.com, or check out the show notes for more details. Let's jump right into it.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout podcast, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now, your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangouts. Today, we are hanging out with homeopath, lactation consultant, educator, author, just to name a few, Patricia Hatherly. Welcome, Patricia.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me.
I just want to say I am ridiculously excited about speaking with you today because pregnancy, birth, babies, breastfeeding, that is totally my jam. I get so excited about that, and you are the expert. So to have you here is such a treat. I'm just wondering, before we delve into all that good stuff, can you give our listeners just a rundown of how you first found out about homeopathy and how you then decided to study it and teach it?
Well, it was never on my radar. When I was growing up, I was from a medical family and I did, explore medical options, but went into teaching. So I really didn't know anything about alternative medicine. In fact, I lived in a regional city. There were certainly no homeopaths or naturopaths living there. I've probably heard about naturopathy first. I had a healing crisis after my second child. I had a detached retina, and it was a pretty low point in my life, and I got interested in reading about nutrition and looking after myself, which is really important when you're a new mum. And it was then when we came to Brisbane in the mid-80s. We've heard about a man who had studied some medicine, and then he had studied homeopathy. So we started going to him with the children, and I ended up working for him. I had an early morning job between 7 and 9 a.m. I would go in and open up and sort of do the filing, and I would make up medicines for patients. And I was there for a year, and that got me interested. So then I went and explored it at the college and studied it.
Amazing. And then how does the lactation consultancy tie in with all of this? Because that's another huge passion of yours.
Well, that was just another thing. I mean, I'd always been interested in breastfeeding. I mean, I used to breastfeed my dolls, and, whenever anybody around, like an aunt or a friend was feeding, I would sit and watch. I was just always fascinated. And I joined the Nursing Mothers Association when I was pregnant with my babies and became a counsellor. And then in 1989, when the international accreditation to be a lactation consultant was available in Australia, so that was the second year that was available, I sat that exam, and I was accredited for 20 years as a lactation consultant. So I'm no longer accredited, but I do keep up my CERPs, and I'm interested still. So it's 45 years now I've worked with mothers and babies, certainly in that field, and I've written 2 books on milk. So it's, it's a very narrow focus, but it's certainly a passion of mine.
Amazing. And I learned a little fact about you somewhere, that you're the oldest of 6 daughters, right?
Yes, I am. I was
Yeah.
a little mother. In fact, when my mother had number 5 child, I was 7. I used to get up at dawn at 5 when she cried, and I would change her nappy and give her her bottle. And then when Mum had the next baby, I was 13, and we were in a 2-story house then, and I would sleep downstairs next to the crib, and I would give her the 2 a.m. bottle, and then go up to my bed and gave my mother a bit of sleep. But I mean, I was just always into babies. I just loved them. I was babysitting for money when I was 11.
Mhm.
I was in high demand, but I just really loved to do it, and I was good at it. I took good care, and it was my thing.
I identified with that story so much when I heard it the first time, because I have a sister who's 10 years younger, and I was that little mother always that, with my mum used to say I'm her first mum and my mum is the second mum. And yeah, just loved, she was like my little baby. It was so fun. And yes, very lovely. So tell us a little bit about human breast milk. Why is it like the ultimate superfood? What is so amazing about human breast milk? And tell us some fun facts.
Eugenie, we don't have long enough for that. Look, I mean, if people are interested, there is a lot of information about that on my website. There's a whole section on breastfeeding, but it's a very unique substance. I mean, interestingly, I guess I could start off by saying that every milk is species specific, and there is a chart about that on my website. So human milk is for human babies. It's 85% water. It's only 1% protein. It's about 5% fat, and it's 7% lactose. So human milk, primate milk, dolphin milk, and interestingly, the milk of the donkey are all high in lactose. So they're all intelligent animals. So that's important because it makes the brain grow. Mm-hmm. Cow's milk has got 3 times the protein that we've got and got hardly any lactose. So it's really not the most appropriate substitute for humans. The donkey's milk is actually the more appropriate substitute. But the thing is, people need to realise is that, we gestate our babies and nourish them through our placenta for 9 months, and then the baby is born, because if it stayed in any longer, it wouldn't fit through the birth canal. And so mammals are either altricial or precocious. So humans are altricial mammals. That means they need a nest to complete their development. And the development then at the breast is what happens then. And primates lactate for 6 times the gestation rate. So that's supposed to be till over 4. The babies are supposed to have access to their mother's milk. And if you go among, go to the Akung, or you go in the highlands of New Guinea, or you go into the Amazon forests, I mean, those women would be feeding their babies for 5 or 6 years, because if they didn't, they would die. There is no substitute. That's what you have to do. And interestingly, a lot of those cultures practice polygamy. So, that mother and baby are, doing their thing separate. And that's the way I think nature has designed it, to keep population down. I think we're probably only supposed to have 2 or at the most 3 babies in our lifetime, and they should be good 5 or 6 years apart. And I mean, I don't know whether your audience knows much about Erickson. He was a psychologist who was a disciple of Freud, and he has a model called the 8 epigenetic stages of man. People know more about Maslow, I think, but Erickson's model, I think, is more superior. And he says that those first 2 stages, which go from birth till 4, that's the primal period, are with the mother. When a baby starts to crawl away, but can crawl back to the breast, he can trust his world, and then he can leave and come and leave and come, and then he develops a sense of autonomy. And then he's quite happy to go out and go to kindy and go to school by mum, by the age of 4. But those first 4 years are really important to be with the mother, and that she has a unique immunological profile to deliver to the baby, to mature all the organ system and the gut and the microbiome. And interestingly, there's a substance in human milk, or it's in body fluids, it's called microRNA, and it has the epigenetic tags going back 60 years. So, the mother's milk will give the ancestral message, if you like. So if you think of a baby a bit like a hard drive that needs its software uploading, the milk will do that, apart from anything else. But I mean, there's a lot more I could say about it. But wow. Studies that have been done where they've followed long-term, people who have been breastfed, they're just more healthy. Any of the big diseases you can name, heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, they're all linked to not being breastfed. It has a huge impact on society.
Mm-hmm. And then the scary part is if you look at birth these days, and I'm just thinking about the clients I see in my clinic on a daily basis who there's so much unnecessary intervention during pregnancy and in the birth process these days. So many of our clients end up with C-sections, and then that hormonal cascade doesn't happen, which then means the milk isn't being established properly, and then the mothers are not supported in their breastfeeding journey, and then they give up. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
It's a bit of a worry, isn't it, this whole, growth in intervention. I mean, I guess, people sort of think it's helping, if you can conceive a baby in a test tube and then have it delivered by cesarean. But it does interfere with the oxytocin imprints that are supposed to go with all of that. And if the baby's exposed to oxytocin at gestation and through labour, there's a big feedback mechanism. And then at the breast, the receptors are formed in the child. And if they don't get that exposure, those receptors are not there. And that's when the autism spectrum will raise its head. So, it's really quite important. But, if women go to hospital and get processed, the chances of a Caesar certainly increased. And, of course, you go on the drip and have the artificial oxytocin to have the labour expedited. Again, we know that interferes with oxytocin receptors. But, if it's a good, normal physiologic birth, nature has kind of deigned that babies have the ability to find their way to the breast, the same as all mammals can do. And the baby's on the mother's abdomen, squiggling around, she's getting oxytocin peaks every time the baby has a little wriggle. They've done research on this, really interesting. And so she's just falling more and more in love with her baby. And by the time it gets to the breast, within that first hour, the baby's very alert, can crawl, creep, is looking for the nipple. But if it can imprint, doesn't matter what sort of nipple she's got, it knows that that's the nipple that they need to go to. It can be long, short, wide, whatever. As long as nothing else goes in the mouth, that the babies would be fine, unless it's got a tongue tie.
Amazing.
And it's like a lesson. If I struggle, I'll survive. I got this. And, of course, when it's on the abdomen, it's getting the mother's bacteria in the nose and mouth, and that's really important for establishing the gut microflora. Really important for nobody to touch the baby except the mother in that time. So there's a whole lot of little things that go on. Yeah.
Amazing. And homeopathy blows my mind on a daily basis because we have remedies made from pretty much anything on the planet, including human breast milk. And I'm wondering if you can maybe tell our audience a bit about our breast milk remedies, maybe from the various different animals, and your book that you've written about it, and how, these remedies are usually prescribed by practitioners, not something you're going to buy off the shelf, but maybe how you've used some of these milk remedies in your practice.
Well, for a start, if a mother's lactation is failing or she has to wean early, she can actually make a remedy herself from her own breast milk. And the recipe on how to do that is on my website. It's very easy to do, and that means that she's then got that to give to her baby, which is, I think, lovely. But it is a remedy that so on the psychological level, the Lac Humanum, which is our remedy made from human milk, is a remedy for good self-esteem, having a good sense of self, about being comfortable in your own skin, being able to be alone and not have the need of being in the group or being accepted by a group, but happy enough to participate in a group. But then on the physical level, it is a remedy for maturing the gut. So there's a lot of people who've got big issues with the digestive system. It's a remedy that we would certainly consider in those instances. And it also does affect the endocrine system, sometimes with women. It's a good remedy for mastitis sometimes. But I guess you and I know that it's a complex issue. It's not a matter of you just have the remedy for the what. But
it was just
certainly
more
has
for
a place.
Sorry, it was just more for interest's sake, because the people
Yes,
listening
yes,
to this,
absolutely.
yeah,
For
just
interest's
to
sake.
give them an idea of some of
But certainly the instance of being able to make one from your own milk, I think, is something that would interest your viewers, and how to do that. So it's very easy to do. You just need a few bottles and a bit of good quality, high grade vodka would probably do it. Then you've got it, and you can still give that to your baby if they're sick. Like when you're breastfeeding a little toddler and they get a cold, they often go to the breast more often in order to help get well. And that's because the baby's saliva will inoculate the breast, and the breast milk will immediately make antibodies to whatever it is the baby's got. That's the other amazing thing about human milk. It's so dynamic, so dynamic. And the other thing too that may interest your viewers is that it's full of stem cells, like that can be made into anything. So it's quite an amazing substance.
It is. I'm very glad that you mentioned about our listeners making a remedy from their own breast milk. I was hoping you would mention that. It was going to be one of my questions if you didn't. But what are some other instances of why somebody might want to use that? Because I know a lot of ears would be perking up right now. A remedy made from my own breast milk. Wow.
You mean with children, or do you mean generally?
Yeah, no, with children, like a mum listening to this right now, probably having her mind blown, going, wow, I can make a homeopathic remedy that I can use for my child with my own breast milk. Can you maybe say a little bit more about that?
Look, I think if it's certainly the child is being bullied at school, not feeling good about him or herself, it would really help in that situation. Certainly too, if the little one's got bad sinus issues, it would really help. Certainly gut issues, it would really help. So just every system in the body really is helped by human milk, because it's designed to mature the body and make it complete. So I don't know whether that's helpful, but I mean, certainly if a mother has her own milk to give to her own child, everything that child needs is there in that milk. I used to think it'd be really good to have milk banks and make formula from human milk, and I think it still has its place, but there's nothing that will beat the mother and child transmission because of the whole genetic epigenetic thing. See, you're younger than I am. I mean, I grew up in the 50s and I had all the childhood diseases. I don't know whether you had a chance to have mumps, measles and chickenpox, but
yeah,
a lot of women these days don't get them, and so that's not in their milk. Whereas it was in my milk, because I had those, and those antibodies were there. So that that's the kind of thing that you need to consider with what you can pass on to your little one. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm wondering if you would mind sharing some cases from your clinic with our listeners of where you've used some of these remedies made from human milk, but also the milk of other animals. And maybe you can tell us a bit about your book that you've written about this, your books.
Look, there's a lot on my website that people can go and read, because it's quite complex. Okay, so we're talking to mums here. So there is a remedy made from camel's milk, which is a good remedy for teenagers. And I've written a few cases of this. And often the issue is that they're not liking school. School sucks, can't stand teachers, they can't tell me what to do. And the child or the individual is very, very concerned about appearance and about that side of things, which is very much a teenage insecurity thing. So doesn't want to study, just wants to play around, is exploring sexual preferences. So that is covered by that remedy, which is a bit unusual. Do I like boys? Do I like girls? That sort of thing. So that's a very interesting one. The milk of the dolphin, on the other hand, is a great remedy to give mums just before they have a baby. Dolphins make wonderful midwives, and there was back in the 70s a place in New Zealand you could go to birth with dolphins, and there was a midwife up in the Black Sea, a male midwife, Igor Shakovsky. He used to take women to the Black Sea to birth with the dolphins. So, if a pregnant woman is near a dolphin pool, they'll often come up, the dolphins will come. They have this actual connection. And interestingly, if you can Google this, but if you look at the development of the zygote before the limbs start to bud, the human one, you've got that head and that little tail, and look at a dolphin one, they're identical. We actually have a similar number of chromosomes, and there is a theory that there was a line of evolution that connects the dolphins to us. So that's why around birth that there is this connection. So there's a big article about that on my website people might like to read. It's a really interesting story. So what else do we have? Okay, so we've got milk made from the kangaroo. And I have found clinically that that's a remedy to give people who have come from another country to settle into Australia and haven't settled well, maybe getting hay fever or feeling maybe alienated and not settled into the land. So I found that that's good. What else? The milk of the elephant is a good remedy to support women around the area of abortion and infertility. The elephants are great matriarchs. The herd is mostly female and little ones, and when the males are 10, they get kicked out. So it's a very female energy, and it's like all of the females are intent in looking after the little ones. When an elephant gives birth, all the elephants will then come and surround her to protect her and the baby. If anything's wrong with the calf, the whole herd stops to make sure everything's okay. The Maasai say that the elephant has a soul. It's an interesting kind of connection. They never forget. Okay, so what are some other ones? The milk of the wolf is very interesting. It's about being alert and dependent and having high energy. Very complex remedy, that one, and I actually have used that a lot, that remedy. And it has a connection to the dolphin. They say that the dolphin evolved from the wolf. The wolf took to the ocean at some stage and evolved into the dolphin.
Wow, I haven't heard that one before. Nothing surprises me these days, though. I'm trying to keep an open mind to everything. The milk of a dog is one I use very often, and the milk of a cat I've used a few times. Can you tell us some more? Because I can literally sit here all day and listen to you talk about these remedies. So do you have
the milk of the cat is well known for eye trouble, those kind of senses. It's not a remedy I've actually ever used in clinic, interestingly enough. Milk of the dog I have, definitely. And it's big remedy for tonsillitis, strep throat. I find that often it'll come up in people who have been adopted. They actually don't have a mother and don't have any sense of what mothering is, and certainly with women who come in who are older and have got children and they feel a little bit at sea with and anxious about mothering and confident about mothering, that the milk of the dog is one of the ones that will help them with that, because the dog will mother anything. Like you can give a litter of kittens that's mothered to a dog, and if she's fed, she'll feed them. They feed anything. The internet abounds with pictures of dogs feeding fawns and pigs and guinea pigs, and they're just very maternal. So there's a big issue about mothering and not having those models of mothering that'll come up in this remedy.
I've often prescribed that remedy for bullying as well. It's one of the top ones that I found for children who get bullied at school, and then I've given them lacaninum, that underdog theme, and once a little bit too successfully, because the mum reported that her child who was getting bullied, after the remedy punched the boy in the face. So it worked probably a little bit too well, but he did stand up for himself.
Use your words.
Yeah, absolutely. So
there is a saying that there's nothing lower than a dog's belly, and that's that whole energy around lacaninum is, if you're being bullied and you don't have a good sense of self, I can see that would work really well.
Something that always amazes me, because homeopathy is my first go-to for anything that happens in our house. And whenever people say to me, I have a headache, or I have mastitis, or I have this or that, and I say, well, have you tried a remedy? And they go, I didn't know you could use homeopathy for that. I'm like, you can use homeopathy for literally everything. So I'm wondering, can you maybe run our listeners through some situations in pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, maybe trying to establish breastfeeding, birth trauma, just what sort of things can they use homeopathy for in this process? I know me and you know we can use it for everything, but maybe give some specific examples of how homeopathy can be used for this very important stage.
In a way, I'm kind of loath to do that, Eugenie, because every situation is different and it's individual, and there's nothing routinist. Like, for instance, a niece of mine, she's new into the family. She married my nephew. Just emailed me yesterday. She'd woken up with some mastitis, and she had a kit, and she took belladonna, and it was definitely bryonia that she needed. So, I just sometimes think, it's always better, I think, to talk to your homeopath, unless it's, you've had a fall and you want arnica. That's pretty good. But it's such an individual thing. But certainly, as you say, it can be used for everything, except for setting bones. Although, root low, it will help bones to heal.
I was more thinking like specific situations, like, like I know we can use it for everything, but maybe some examples. So you can use homeopathy for mastitis. You can use it if you have trouble with your milk coming in. You can use it for...
Well, certainly I use homeopathy for a lot of mastitis, And if you go and look in the repertory, that's of course our book where we will look up to see the range. But under mastitis, there are dozens of remedies, dozens of them. And so it is very much an individual thing. And again, you would have to know all the intricacies. Like if someone woke up in the afternoon after a nap with mastitis suddenly, that had come on suddenly, it would definitely be a belladonna mastitis because of the timing, the sudden inset. If mastitis came on in a woman who'd been breastfeeding for 8 or 9 months and she just got her periods back, it'd probably be a phytolacca mastitis. Same as it would be phytolacca mastitis if she got that in the first week just after she's had a baby, because these are times when there's hormonal shifts and the body's not working so well. If there's a lot of flu type symptoms with mastitis, it would probably be a bryonia mastitis. A lac humana mastitis is one that will change sides, and there's often anger towards the mother for not having helped out or something else. There's some issue with mothering. And again, of course, the swapping sides, you would think of lac caninum, which again is another one for mastitis. I haven't used any of the other milks for mastitis, although I understand that the milk of the camel has been used for mastitis, but I've seen it as a remedy that's cropped up in breast cancer, actually, which is another issue altogether. But they're always helpful, and they'll always do something good. And just check with your homeopath to make sure that, you got it spot on and that you looked at everything, because sometimes the oddest little thing that someone won't think about will lead you to a remedy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
often this is an interesting little one. I just had an email from a patient who's overseas this week, and 2 of her girls had just started wetting the bed at night, just like out of the blue, really drenching. And of course, I had a bit of a look at it, and she said that she had she's very strict with the diet, this mother, and because it had been someone's birthday, she'd given them some cakes that she'd made on coconut flour, and she said they hadn't had that for a while. She just happened to put that in the email, and I went, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to explore creosote and coconut, because creosote is a remedy that we often think for children who wet the bed at night. And interestingly, creosote is made from burning coconut husks. So that's what caused it, just giving the coconut in the diet. So I said, get the coconut out and give the remedy and everything will settle. But that was just a few days ago, so I'll wait to hear. But you've got to be a little bit of a detective when you're a homeopath, because causation is really important. What changed, what happened, to disturb your equilibrium.
I love listening to stories in the clinic, and I know our listeners do too, because that's the number one feedback that people always give me. I love listening to stories of how homeopathy has helped people. So I wonder if you can maybe share a little bit more about some cases that you've seen in your clinic, what sort of cases you see often. Just whatever you'd like to share.
Probably with babies, one of the things that I'll see most often would be reflux. Yeah, so when they're being breastfed. Interestingly enough, probably the remedy that would crop up most for that is that one made from bicarbonate of soda, that carb. And those babies are often very sensitive to a lot of things that are in the mother's diet, particularly dairy. That's a big one, big one. I mean, the other thing that'll probably interest your listeners is that, if one of the mum gives birth to a bub that's got any kind of midline abnormality, certainly the most gross would be some sort of cleft, but just a tongue tie or something with the umbilicus or hypospadias, that's a sign that epigenetically there's been tuberculosis, probably 3 or 4 generations back, and that comes down as an inability to tolerate dairy. They're the people who do not tolerate dairy at all well, and it's really important to get that out of the diet. And certainly when babies are feeding and if they start to bite, I usually just say, okay, you've just introduced solids. What do you give? I'm giving yogurt, I'm making custard. And of course, the mother has perhaps not had any dairy much at all, but that's aggravating the baby and she still needs to keep that out of the diet. I do always recommend that mothers have cream and have good butter because they're made from fat and got the tiniest little bit of protein in it. So that just keeps the babies in touch with dairy so that later on, when they're definitely a toddler and everything's mature, they could probably tolerate little bits of dairy every now and then and not be an issue. But you've got to be very careful early on and you can look for those clinical signs, and dairy is definitely an issue.
You said something interesting about the bite, because a lot of people listening to this would never have thought that you can use a homeopathic remedy for a baby who bites at the breast. Just showing again how you can use homeopathy for everything. Have you got any other?
It's usually Calc-Phos is usually the remedy, which is one of our children's constitutional remedies. See what's happening in that situation. So we know from research that a baby at the breast has what's called synchronous suck. So a baby can suckle and breathe and swallow at the same time because the milk is physiologic. But when a baby's been given a bottle of formula, so it's goat's milk or cow's milk, they can't suck and swallow and breathe at the same time. And so that's why every now and then you take the bottle out and they kind of catch the breath. So when the baby starts to bite, it's doing that because they're struggling to breathe and feed. So they bite to get a pause. So they get a breath and then they can go back to feeding. So that's what's happening there. So it's like a little bit of transient apnea. And Calc-Phos is the remedy, but you've got to get the dairy out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. Any other stories that you want to share or anything that you see very often in your clinic? And actually, I'll add in there, you have a very long history of experience. Is there any conditions popping up these days that you didn't see 10 or 20 years ago?
Can we talk about vaccination?
Sure.
I do see a lot of children who, haven't coped well with their schedule when they come in. And there are certainly some remedies that will bring them back to wellness, and that can certainly be done with homeopathy, which is good. There's actually, I have a newsletter called Milk Matters, which I archived on my website, and the very last one I published is still there on the homepage, and it's the story of a child who was 3 when she came, and she was autistic, and she went to normal school by the time she was 5. And that was just using homeopathic medicines over those couple of years to get her back to wellness. So the scope of what we can do with our remedies is quite profound. But kids with ADHD and learning difficulties, that sort of thing, particularly if there's been trauma in the birth or they've not coped well with the vaccines or they've had a lot of antibiotics, and it just depends what's going on. We can help to kind of fix that damage, if you like, just kind of get them on a good start again. It's not a quick fix, but it's certainly doable. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to share from your clinic?
Just thinking of children. They're probably the biggest ones when you think about it. I mean, well, the other thing too is ear infections and the needing of grommets. That's another big issue that'll come up. There is a couple of remedies that are quite specific for that, so that can sort that out. And certainly, when children have got those kind of pathologies and you give a remedy, it's possible for the eardrum to burst. And if people freak about that, but of course that's the body's ability to drain things away, and then it will heal. Same as a cut on the skin will heal, so it's no big deal. But that can be fixed with homeopathy, so that the child doesn't have to have the anaesthetic and have the grommets put in. But then that'll often come back to dairy intolerance too. That one, yeah.
I heard you in one of your chats that you did, one of your interviews, you mentioned something about the importance of zinc for new mothers, which I didn't know about. Can you maybe share a little bit about that with our audience?
Yeah. Well, zinc is stored in the body in the gonads. So in the males, it's in the testes, and in the female, in the ovaries. And they know from research that at the moment of conception, there's this thing called the zinc spark, where there's lots of zinc in those gametes. It makes for a really healthy conception. So it's really important for that to be on board. The same is also important too for folinic acid. I mean, we say folic acid, but folinic acid is the activated form. So you need to look for a supplement that's got folinic acid. But both the males and the females should be on it for at least 3 months before they have a baby, because the male is giving half the genetic material. And, if the folate is good, then you're less likely to have a tongue tie. That's really good advice to have. But interestingly, it's zinc that's implicated in colic. Because at the end of a pregnancy, the estrogen drives up copper. And so your zinc kind of lowers. And that's why at the end of pregnancy, you're a bit blah and you've got white spots, you've got stretch marks, you don't feel like eating. They're all signs of low zinc. But if the copper's high, it means you can have good contractions to have the birth. So that's why nature does it that way. So then afterwards, it's really important to get the zinc up in the diet, because zinc is a cofactor for all the enzymes in your body, but particularly for the enzyme that deals with the sugar of milk. So if the mother's zinc is low and stays low, the baby's more likely to get bellyache and colic because they're lacking zinc. So zinc-rich foods are really important. Zinc supplements really important in those early days. To help Bubby establish the enzymes in the gut to cope with the sugar of milk. Yeah. The other thing that can really help in that situation is to make sure the mother's diet is devoid of simple sugars and really high in protein and fat. So cover the palm of the hand with protein 5 times a day. So most women are around about 60 kilos, so they need their ideal body weight plus 20 in protein grams a day. So usually about 80 protein grams a day. So an egg is 6, piece of steak's 25, piece of fish is 15, tin of beans is 10. You don't have to count them up, but if you cover the palm of the hand 5 times a day, you will get enough. And make sure there's all the range of fats. So you need the short chain fatty acids for it's prebiotics in the gut. So that's chicken skin and bacon fat and lamb fat, butter, cream. And you need those mid-chain fatty acids that you're going to get from olive oil and those sorts of oils, nuts and seeds. They're good for the baby's skin. And then the omega-3 fatty acids that you're going to get from seafood are going to be good for the brain, central nervous system development, for the myelin that gets laid down. And if they're not in the diet, they're not in the milk. So that's really important. And the other good thing about seafood is you've got lots of zinc in it, as well as the omega-3, and it's a good source of protein. So I say to mums, in those early months, have seafood every day. Make it a lunch thing. Have sushi, have a tin of tuna with a salad, that sort of thing, just to keep that up. I mean, interestingly, zinc is the only mineral in human milk that drops off after 5 months.
Wow.
Why is that? Well, it has to have something to do with evolution. I mean, when we lived in the caves, it would have been really hard to catch a dinosaur, but really easy to go down to the river or the whatever and get the yabbies and the prawns and the shellfish and fish. So we had high zinc foods, which were weaning foods given to babies. So the ability or need for it in the milk just dropped off. So that's quite fascinating. Yeah.
So, Patricia, can you share with us any advice that you have for mothers to ensure they have a great pregnancy and birth and beyond? Just some words of wisdom.
Look, I think it needs to start 3 to 6 months before, if you've been on the oral contraceptive pill, to come off early. Really focus on good nutrition, that is zinc rich, folic acid rich. A conception that is physiologic is optimal. And then, of course, it's so hard for women these days. We know they're the breadwinner and they have a stressful work environment. But it is a time when, if you can, to go a little bit more inward. I mean, in my mother's time and my grandmother's time, where they would just knit layets and sew and, that you'd spend that time in the rocking chair preparing for the baby. We don't do that now. We just buy everything online. And so that's, I think, something to think a bit about, to kind of have that connect, I think is important. But certainly eating well is just super important. And I know that's really hard in the early weeks. But see, that's when homeopathy can be amazing, Most women, it's sepia, is a bit of a go-to remedy. But, I mean, it can be other remedies too, of course. But certainly morning sickness is definitely able to be dealt with homeopathy. And miraculously so, really. It's just such a difference. And, of course, if women get colds and things like that in the pregnancy and they worry about taking pharmaceuticals, well, then again, if you come and see the homeopath and just get whatever you need to get you through that is a safe option to do, which is great. Maybe get a doula. Don't go to hospital birthing classes. Go to your local yoga instructor who does birth education. Will just make you look a bit more holistically at the whole thing and not be so linked into that this is what happens in hospital. More confident to stay home for as long as you can before you go to hospital to birth, because the only reason you go to hospital is to make sure that if anything goes wrong, you're in a situation where it can be dealt with. But to birth is a normal physiologic act, the same as intercourse is, the same as defecation is. It is a normal physiologic act. But certainly there's a more complex one and things can go wrong. But to have confidence in your body's ability to do it, I think is really important, and to be really looking forward to the birth. Making sure that you've got good support around you afterwards. So wise women is important. A mother who's maybe breastfed, or an aunt, or someone you can talk to if you have issues, because the first few months are very difficult. You're low on sleep, you're tired, you might have stitches, a whole host of things could be going on, and it's important to eat really well and just be able to be connected to your baby. And once you get through that, things are fine. But that first 40 days is pretty tough going. But, it's doable and it passes. Mm-hmm. But then, any breastfeeding issues, get a lactation consultant, see your homeopath, because they can all be fixed. Yeah, they can all be fixed. I've helped women through some most amazing pathologies, certainly thrush in the nipples, when nipples are just about dropping off. Homeopathy can fix all of that, and changes in diet. But just getting the right help at the right time will sort it out. And focus on how good this is for the baby, but also for the planet. For 500 calories a day, a woman will produce litres of milk, which on the open market are worth thousands of dollars. There have been serious economic papers written about the contribution to the GDP of a nation that breastfeeding does. It's tremendous. You're not cutting down trees and grazing cattle, and got manufacturing for making milk and processing milk and making bottles and transport and electricity and advertising. You just go on and on and on. It's huge. It's huge. So, we're all wanting to make the world a better place, and there's no better way to start than at the breast.
I've never thought about it until you've just mentioned that. But yes, all of those formula tins that don't end up in the waste. Yeah. Amazing. It is. Another good reason to breastfeed if you can.
It is. And it's kind of interesting that, when AIDS first came out and there was this big kind of jerk reaction of like babies and mothers have to be separated because people were worried. In Africa, you may even know of this, it was disastrous. I mean, out in the communities, babies were just dying because, they can't afford to buy formula. There isn't electricity or clean water. And so there's been a lot of research done now, and they know that there's a lot of things in breast milk that are specific for dealing with AIDS. And so, women can certainly, if they've got AIDS, breastfeed as long as they take their antivirals. And so the babies are doing okay, and society's just going along the way it was before, which is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of things to think about.
So just before we wrap up, can you tell me your top 3 remedies for yourself and why?
Well, I think lacumanum is the most important one. And bowel nosodes, I use both. If you've got a bit of a tummy upset, there's a range of the bowel nosodes that I would take from time to time if something's happened. But then, of course, for me, it's more aches and pains these days. If I hurt myself at tennis, I'll reach for the Rustox. But, lacumanum is, I think, our most important remedy that we do have. And I wasn't breastfed. And so the thing is, when that's been your start in life, there needs to be repair done on that. And I would say that clinically, when I've dealt with anybody over several years, the need to give lacumanum will come up because that's usually the primary etiology for a case, because if that start to life didn't happen, it's a scratch in the record that needs to be rubbed out.
Absolutely. Now, how can our listeners get hold of you and the amazing work that you do? Where are some places they can find you?
Look, I've got a website that's got a lot of free stuff on it, and it's patriciahatherly.com. And there's a contact me button there. Certainly my phone number's there. I'm Patricia at patriciahatherly.com for an email. I'm happy for anybody to email me. And I do a lot of work by Skype, overseas and throughout Australia. So if anyone would like consultations, it's easy enough to arrange. But I'm quite happy to be generous with my time with quick questions. It doesn't bother me at all. And because I'm an educator, it's teaching was my profession. And the thing is, when you're a teacher, it's sort of like, listen, I've got this stuff to share with you. And I'm very passionate about it, wanting people to know the good news. It's such an important thing, to go to the breast is a baby's birthright. And, nobody's advocating for babies. They're kind of seen as a bit of a commodity that, the state owns. It's not like that. They're very vulnerable, very precious, and that whole thing about the mother and baby is very sacrosanct, I think. We need to, as a community, be aware of that and preserve it and have a conversation about how we can help mothers, to have meaningful lives in career and still be mothers. So there should be workplace creches, there should be more working from home, more flexibility, more job sharing. I would like the government to pay mothers who breastfeed, give them a bonus because of what they're doing for the population. Mm-hmm. We just need to get real.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Today has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know there's going to be a lot of mums out there today that's going to really benefit from this information that you've shared. So thank you so much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's listened.